Good Wednesday evening, and welcome to Who's Terrorizing Who Tonight. I'm your host, Phil Gurski, president of Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting, and also a former strategic analyst with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and the author of a number of books on terrorism. I'm glad to see there's a few of you out here already. Welcome back to the Honest Critique from Indy. I assume that's you, Ratnadeep. Hey, Joseph, Realpolitik. Nice to see you here tonight as well. JB and Aaron, welcome, guys. Hope you had a good day today. It was incredibly nice here in Russell. It was about 10 or 12 degrees. The snow is melting. I can see parts of my roof I haven't seen since, November. I can even see parts of my lawn, despite the fact there's still 2.5 meters of snow on it. So depending on where you are, I won't ask about the weather in India. I'm sure it's a heck of a lot warmer there than it is here. But welcome, guys. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. I hope that you will like this on YouTube and hopefully subscribe to us. We're trying to get more subscribers all the time. For those of you back for another evening, welcome back. There was actually a question that was asked at the end of last night's session that made me think about a topic for tonight. But before I get into that, I want to share with you something that happened today. And that was I was attending a seminar that is normally on in person, but because of COVID, of course. Good evening, Bill from Newfoundland. This is the Ottawa Conference on Security and Defense. It's an annual conference arranged by the Canadian Defense Association, or CDA. They normally get close to 1,000 people in attendance. I believe there was over 1,000 signed up for this thing, and they had a bunch of sessions today, which I attended a few of them. A lot of very high-ranking people. I mean, extremely senior Australian, American, Canadian defense officials. It is largely a defense-oriented conference. And let me just read to you the names of some of the panels that are part of this year's conference, and you tell me what's missing. So the first panel, after the introductions, yada, 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 threats and challenges to Canada and strategies for resiliency and coordination with like-minded nations. And the speakers were two deputy ministers from Canada. Second panel was on space. Congested, contested, competitive, the new space context. Then a bunch of keynotes from some senior people. And then a session which is actually going on right now because of the time difference. It's called Prosperity and Security in the Indo-Pacific, engaging the Quad and framing a Canadian approach to this issue. Tomorrow is on geopolitics and artificial intelligence. JP commenting on resiliency. Yeah, I know your dad would like that. Tomorrow as well is fighting right-wing extremism in Canada. Then there's a panel on gender and operational culture in the Canadian Armed Forces. One on NATO and UK-Canada cooperation. And then the final one is on the Arctic. So this is a conference, as I said, that brings together some pretty senior people from around the world to talk about threats that the Defense Department and armies have to worry about. And the only session on terrorism talks about right-wing extremism in Canada, which, by the way, is not a priority for the Department of National Defense because they don't really have a domestic mandate. I mean, right-wing extremism will be covered by CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, where I used to work, and or the RCMP. And Realpolitik, and JB, you caught it. There's not a single panel on jihadis. Despite the fact that, as I've been showing for the past, 25 years now, 20 years maybe, this is the single greatest threat to the planet. And if Canadian forces are going to deploy abroad, as they have traditionally in Afghanistan, where you were, Bill, or in Somalia, they were there in the 90s, or currently, or until recently in the Sahel, so that part of Africa kind of just south of the Sahara Desert, every single threat the Canadian military is facing outside of our country, without exception, in 2021, has to do with Islamist terrorism. And yet this annual Canadian Defense Association conference saw fit, or rather didn't see fit, to include a single panel, a single speaker on Islamist terrorism. So what does that say to you? I don't want to use the trite phrase political correctness, although there certainly is a problem with people pushing back against the term Islamist extremism. I've seen a lot of writing recently about those who want to ban the term because it smacks of Islamophobia, which is completely wrong, but that's what people are saying. You know, you've heard me complain a lot that oh, hey, Philip, welcome to the pod. This is your first time on the live stream. Welcome, welcome. Why are people afraid to talk about Islamic extremism? Help me understand. Well, you've come to the right place, my friend, and I hope you're going to subscribe to the channel as of tonight if you find it interesting enough. We've been led to believe, as of, March, almost mid-March in 2021, that the number one and only threat when it comes to terrorism is the far right, i.e. the jihadis don't matter anymore. Despite the fact that I've been showing, and there's a feature that if you go to my website, borealisthreatandrisk.com, I heartily recommend you subscribe because there's lots of material there. I've been showing that ever since the attacks on Capitol Hill in early January of this year, every single terrorist attack anywhere on our planet, and by extension, anywhere in the known universe, with one or two exceptions, has been carried out by jihadis. Every single one. And the two that were exceptions were not right-wing extremists. They were Shia extremists, actually. So there is a reluctance. It's like people are tired of talking about it. Or they're afraid of being called, like I have been called, an Islamophobe for talking about Islamist extremism, despite the fact they're carrying on all the attacks and 99% of the victims are other Muslims. And that somehow makes me an Islamophobe for pointing that out. So JB says, I'll play devil's advocate here. Is it possible there is nothing new to say about Islamist terrorism and a lot to say about the far right, given the latest news? Yeah, that is a possibility, and I certainly accept that. But it seems to me that there actually is a lot to say about Islamist extremism because it's morphing and it's mutating on a daily basis. So a year ago, for example, at this conference, you would not have had a session on what's happening in Mozambique because there was no real information on Islamist terrorism by an Islamic State affiliate called Islamic State Central African Province in Mozambique. And they're very active there. I just was seeing some tweets from a friend of mine that I mentioned a few days ago, Jasmine Opperman, who was a part of my podcast about 6 months ago, that it's getting worse. And it's getting worse in a lot of places. Islamic State's getting worse in Iraq and Syria. Islamic State Western African Province is kind of aligned with Boko Haram right now. So yeah, there is a lot to say about Islamic State, a lot to say about their affiliates, a lot to say about the Taliban. I tweet every day about Taliban attacks in Afghanistan. So this to me is the elephant in the room, which nobody wants to talk about because it's not the flavor of the month. And that really, really worries me as an analyst. We can certainly talk about different things. We don't have to talk about the same thing all the time, but to ignore it completely in an international conference, defense conference that talks about challenges for the future, strategic forecasting, and you're not talking about Islamist extremism, there's something wrong here. Bill says Canada had 2 diplomats kidnapped by AQIM, which is Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, in Niger in 2006. The jihadist threat is not diminished. You're absolutely right, Bill. It is not diminished at all. So JB asks, what about China? Yes, China came up a lot today, and so it should. And if somebody can convince the Trudeau government that China is not our friend and that we should be pushing back against Huawei and we should be